1896. What is this?
This is too interesting, and so therefore it's not running out of time. Too many interesting things to see, photographs, paintings, exhibits, too many interesting people to talk with. So I'm just, actually what it is my pleasure to do is to present another interesting speaker. My colleague Lionel Kimball is an associate professor of history at Chicago State. Lionel is really a terrific resource who brings a perspective that we need to hear, because it's in some ways jumps right from what Paul was saying before the break about people's telling their own stories of the region, telling stories of agency, how people act and make their own history. In his case, it has to do with the particulars of two public housing developments on the far south side of Chicago, which were the ones that I mentioned before, the National Park Service flagged as of national significance. And so it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Lionel Kimball. I want to say quickly that I haven't seen Greg Jones yet, our next speaker, but we'll take that as it comes. Also wanted to say, just on the logistic, practical point of view, the bus for the tour arrives 12:30 for 1, and we're going to try to have them on that side of the building for pickup later on. But first, here's Lionel Kimball from Chicago State.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, afternoon. My paper or presentation looks at African American veterans, World War II veterans, and their search for post-war housing. And the title of my paper, which I didn't write on the title of my paper here, comes from a quote from the novel Trumbull Park, which was written by a black veteran named Frank Ludwig Brown. And I generally, I kind of poo-poo this when my students always start paper with a quote, but I think it was very appropriate for this, given the theme. And this comes from Trumbull Park. It says, and it's really an exchange between protagonists, Brown's character, talking to one of the African Americans who was living in Trumbull Park. And they were talking about how lucky they should feel that they had a clean place to live. And he says, what in the hell have I got to brag about? Did you ever have to carry a gun in church that your wife could pray? That's right, a gun. I've had to take a 45 to that St. Kevin's over there on Torrance and sit behind my wife while she got on her knees and prayed to God. All right? So when I first read this, it really struck a chord with me, because thinking about public housing, my grandmother and my mom and my 3 aunts lived in Oakdale Gardens. And I think the complex was only constructed about 8 years before they moved in there. But the fascinating story my grandmother used to talk about was really this temporary nature of public housing occupancy. She did whatever she could to move out. Right? So this paper comes from a larger project which examines the connection between housing and employment and civil rights in early Black Chicago. And when I'm talking about early, I'm looking at really 1935, 1955, in the years before the traditional civil rights era. This particular paper looks at black veterans, because my major argument is that when they returned home from the Second World War, they had a different sense of what America really should and ought to be like. All right, so this is comes out of the larger book, which is in preparation now, and I really hope you enjoyed it. I welcome any questions that you may have at the end of this presentation. Now let's take a look at what this means for the Calumet region, which is really why we're really here. All right. As Dr. Bowman talked about, I'm going to talk about really 2 particular public housing projects. The first are Fernwood Park Homes, Fernwood Park Better Housing Project, and the second one is Trumbull Park Homes. Right? Trumbull Park has a longer history. It was one of developing one of the first rounds of public housing construction on the far south side in the shadows of the steel mills. All right, so I'm going to talk about really those two. But before I talk about Fernwood Park, we really have to revisit one of the first significant racial disturbances over public housing, and that occurred at Airport Homes in 1946. All right. Airport Homes was a site of one of the first post-World War II housing riots in the city of Chicago. All right. And much of the conflict that surrounded Airport came with the introduction of one veteran and his family. All right. It didn't take a lot for, it didn't take a large number of African Americans to spark these neighborhood controversies. All right. What we see at Airport is that there was this one man, Theodore Turner, and his family, who came into Airport. And upon hearing that an African American was integrating, right, the Airport Homes facilities, we see more than 50 squatters, right, who come and occupy the vacant apartment. Now, these were homes provided for World War II veterans, right? And the largest story of World War II veterans is that for many of them, they believe that after their service over, and I can't reiterate this enough, they believe that when they came back home, they were protected citizens. I served the state, therefore the state owes me something. All right, I was talking to a colleague earlier in the refreshment room, and we were talking about really the larger philosophical platform, foundation which the book is designed upon. And one of the arguments I make is that ideally there's this reciprocal agreement between the federal government and the citizen, between the state and the individual, right? In this relationship, the state agrees to provide certain benefits to its citizens, right? Provide public welfare, public safety, public education, and the like. Provide for the safety and welfare of the citizens, something that's articulated by a number of various historical documents. But the second half of that agreement, that in exchange for these benefits, the citizen agrees to provide certain things to the state, right? Some of these things are voting, paying taxes, working, being a productive citizen, all right? This is what was driving the conflict at Airport, all right? As these individuals, these squatters, believed that they were entitled to shape their neighborhood in whatever way they felt correct, because they too have served in the armed services. So what we have here is this conflict between these two existing groups of veterans, right? This black veteran who said, I need to move to this housing, and these white veterans said, no, we need the housing, and we need to define who lives in our neighborhood, because this is where we live, and this is how we're going to shape our own existence, all right? Needless to say, Turner moves out, all right? There were a number of incidents that took place over the 6 months at Airport Homes. Police cars were attacked, fire trucks were attacked, police officer was injured. There was one incident about this guy who was a coal delivery truck driver, was driving in and his truck was flipped over by the residents. There was a very famous story about the journalist Vernon Jarrett, who just passed away a couple of years ago. He was a young journalist for the Chicago Defender. He was down at Airport, which was a very dangerous place to be during the 1940s. He relays a story about when he's walking down the street, having to jump into the trunk of this guy named Kennedy, who was a communist led president of this organization called the United Negro and Allied Veterans of America. Had to jump in this guy's truck, the trunk of his car, and speed out of the neighborhood as this white mob approached. All right, so it was a very dangerous situation, a dangerous time. All right. Some of the lessons we take from Airport, which really can be applied to these later instances of Trumbull Park and Fernwood. One of the first things that happened is that upon hearing about the integration of Airport Homes, news of this incident spread like wildfire across the city. All right. Folks who didn't live in the neighborhood, live in the community, were coming down to spark racial tensions at Airport. All right. There was no coordination between the Alderman, City Hall, and the police department. In some cases, there was reported that some of the police officers there refused to arrest these so-called white hoodlums, right, who were participating in this violence. All right. One of the few things that's actually saved Turner and his family early on is that Turner was a member of the United Packing House Workers of America. All right. He goes to the packing house workers, and upon hearing about the lax police protection that were offered, right, the packing house workers go down to Airport Home and stand guard every night on the corner with axe handles, right, protecting one of the union members' livelihood. All right. This is the environment you're dealing with, people.